Hey, everybody, we're going to be reading chapter 18 and 19 in Out of My Mind. In chapter 17, we learned about how Melody took the quiz for the quiz team and she scored a perfect score, but even her teachers are in disbelief, and the kids don't believe that she is as smart as she actually is. And even at the end of chapter 17, it says, look at it this way, Mr. Demings told Connor. Mr. Demings is supposed to be a teacher. You'd think that he would understand. It says, if Melody Brooks can win the first round, then my questions must not be difficult enough. We're all going to rally to win this competition. Everyone cheered except me. Okay, so here she is, still continuing to prove that she is very bright. She's brilliant, in fact, but yet still nobody believes her. So we'll have to see what happens in chapter 18 and 19. Chapter 18 is on page 156. I need you following along with me as I read. Chapter 18. After school that day, I was grumpy and mean. Mrs. V had prepared a new stack of word cards for me. Penny was wearing one of Mrs. V's turbans and she looked ridiculous. Plus, she kept singing some stupid baby song at the top of her lungs. I took my arm and swept the whole pile of cards to the floor. Who put salt in your Kool-Aid, Miss Thing? Mrs. V asked. She did not pick up the cards. Penny stopped singing and stood there blinking at me. I switched the Medi-Talk to off and looked away. Fine, be like that. But you're going to pick up every single one of those cards. I stuck out my lip and stared at the wall. Penny reached out and shook my arm. I tugged it loose. She didn't seem to care and started singing again. Happy, 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 clap your feet. Happy, sappy, pappy, blow your nose. Bippy, boppy, bodie, jump and jump. She jumped. She stomped her feet. She sang the song again and again. She was really getting on my nerves. I wish she would just shut up. Talking all the time, walking all the time, jumping and bouncing and singing. Just quit it. For just one moment, please stop. But she wouldn't. Hi, Dee Dee, she said. She put Doodle on my tray. I pushed the toy to the floor. Doodle, Dee Dee. She picked up the stupid raggedy thing and placed it on my tray once more. I knocked it off again. Leave me alone, I wanted to scream. Penny was used to things falling off my chair, so she couldn't know I was just being plain horrible. The third time she put Doodle on my tray, I swept it off with such force that my arm brushed Penny's head. She toppled over and fell to the floor. She looked at me, surprise on her face, grabbed Doodle, and ran to Mrs. V in tears. What's gotten into you, Melody? Mrs. V asked as she rocked Penny on her lap. How could I explain? I didn't want to cry, but I did. I turned my wheelchair so it faced the wall just as the phone rang. Mrs. V looked from me to the phone, sighed, and got up to answer it. Oh, hello, Catherine. Catherine. I turned my chair slightly to listen better. Out of sorts? Mrs. V asked. Well, as a matter of fact, she does seem a little mopey this afternoon. No, I take that back. She's downright monstrous. Mrs. V caught my eye and made a funny face at me. I just glared at her. I'm not surprised. She got all the questions right. The child is brilliant. Lot of good it does me. The teacher said, what? Great. Now everybody would know. Just thinking about it made me feel like pond scum again. In front of her classmates? What kind of professional is he supposed to be? Mrs. V looked furious. How did she react? Never mind, I already know. She's sitting here looking like one of those blowfish we saw at the aquarium, all puffed up and spiny. That's actually kind of close to how I felt. Thanks so much for calling, Catherine, Mrs. V said. Yes, please call her parents this evening, and I'll be sure to talk to them as well. I'm going to work on this problem right now. With that, she hung up the phone, set Penny down on the floor, put her hands on her hips, and turned and looked at me. I figured here's where she hugs me and makes me feel better. So you aced the quiz and then bombed the follow-up, she said to me. Indignation decorating her words. She flipped my talker back on. Why did she sound mad at me? I looked up in surprise. He hurt my feelings, I answered. So what? Mrs. V spat back. Kids laugh, even Rose. It was true, though I could hardly admit it. Even Rose had covered her mouth to stifle a little. stifle a laugh. Did you get the highest score in the class? Mrs. V asked, completely ignoring my attempt to make her feel sorry for me. I should have known better. Yes. Did Catherine help you in any way, even a little bit? No. Then let's get started. I looked at her, a little confused. Started on what? I asked. On your study plan. You and I are going to practice, prepare, and push. I'm going to quiz you, and you're going to answer. We're going to learn geography, science, math, thousands of glorious tidbits of information. She sounded excited. Why? I asked carefully. You know how athletes get ready for the Olympics? They swim early in the mornings and late at night. They run around the track for hours and hours without a crowd to cheer them on. I can't run very fast, I typed. Then I grinned at her. Maybe not, but you're the fastest, strongest brain in the school, and you're going to try out for the quiz team next week. They won't let me be on the team, I typed slowly. Oh, yes, they will. They'll want you, all right. They'll need you, Melody. You're going to be their secret weapon. You think? I know. Now let's cut all this fake feeling sorry for yourself and get started on studying. We have 1 week. I'm the coach and you're my athlete. Get ready to sweat. Sweat stinks, I told her with a laugh. So let's get stinky. But first, you are going to pick up every single one of those cards. I knew not to argue. She took me out of my chair, set me on the floor, and left the room while I pulled the cards that I knocked down into a messy pile on the floor. Penny helped. Then Mrs. V put me back in my chair and we got to work. She was going to be a tough coach. How is the test set up? She asked me. A, B, C, D, I tapped. Multiple choice. Wonderful. Piece of cake for you. I wasn't sure about that, but I didn't disagree with her. She went to the computer and found a web page that listed every U.S. state and capital. Did those in school, I told her. Great. So we'll do them again. I fake groaned. Mrs. V then looked up the capitals of all the major countries in the world. Gee, there sure are a lot of countries. But once she read them out loud to me, I had the info stuck in my head. What's the capital of Hungary? She demanded. I knew the answer was Budapest before she even gave me the 4 choices. A, Ankara, B, Berlin, C, New Delhi, or D, Budapest. I pushed D, of course, but Mrs. V didn't stop to cheer. She kept going. I correctly answered that Tokyo was the capital of Japan, Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, Ottawa, the capital of Canada, and Bogota, the capital of Colombia. She quizzed me until Dad came to pick us up. As Mrs. V stuffed Doodle and some unused diapers back into Penny's bag, she explained briefly what had happened at school and what she planned to do about it. What we were already doing. Are you sure? Dad asked, glancing at me. Maybe we're setting her up for failure, and she'll be hurt even worse. I'm absolutely positive, Mrs. V insisted. Can Melody stay a little longer to study? I'll give her dinner and bring her home in a couple of hours. That will give you some one-on-one time with Penny. You cool with that? Dad asked me. Yes, 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 I typed. I want to do this. Go for it, my Melody, Dad said. He gave Mrs. V a thumbs up sign and left with Penny. After dinner, we moved on to silence. I learned that the bones in the leg are the femur, the tibia, the patella, and the fibula. Why can't they just call them something easy like knee bone and skinny leg bone? But I memorized them. I learned that insects are arthropods and that they have tibias too. The study of insects are called entomology. Mrs. V said, that gives me an idea. Let's learn all the words that end in ology. I put my hand over my head and pretended to groan, but deep inside, I was really jazzed. Which word means the study of words and their meanings? She asked me after we reviewed a very long list of ology words. Bibliology, archaeology, histology, or lexicology. I thought for a minute. I knew she was trying to trick me. Histology sounds like history, but for some reason, I think it has to do with the skin. And bibliography has to do with books, not words. I typed in the letter D. This time she did cheer. Let me get you home, Melody. Top athletes need their sleep. We'll do some more tomorrow. I grinned at her, tired and energized at the same time. Mrs. V had called Catherine and explained the situation, told her to stuff information in my head along with the macaroni at lunch. So the next morning, Catherine, of course, jumped right in. While we were in room H5, Catherine hooked me up on the earphones. I listened to an old audio cassette on volcanoes. It was scratchy and skipped a little, but it gave me information. Volcanoes were named for the Roman god Vulcan. I could have figured that one out myself. I found out about lava and ash. I learned how the whole city of Pompeii got covered up when Vesuvius erupted. Surprisingly interesting stuff. I listened to tapes on Australia and Russia, on constellations and on the planets. You learned anything from these oldies but goodies? Catherine asked as she slipped in another tape with me. It was on disease. Info always good, I typed. I feel you, she replied. Are you still upset about what happened to Mr. Deming's class? Deleted the memory. Needed room for facts. I took the time to type. She gave me a thumbs up. I'm a little scared, I admitted. Suppose I mess up. You can do this, Melody, she said sternly as she adjusted the earphones. You certainly have enough starts to be on the team. Go away while I take the test, I typed. Keep Claire quiet. Gotcha, Catherine said. She held her hand up to slap my palm. It wasn't much of a slap, more like a mushy grab, but we were on the same page. Except for lunch and recess. I listened to tapes and worked with Catherine the rest of the day. She quizzed me on facts and dates and kings and math. That must be hard for me. Words flow easily in my head, but numbers seem to sink to the bottom like rocks. I don't know why. Let's do it again, Catherine said gently as I got mixed up on a math problem about trains and their speed. Nobody rides trains anymore. Who cares? But she kept at it until it made sense to me. I discovered that if I make numbers into a picture story in my mind, the answer comes easily. I changed the figures to words. Magic. Instead of going out for inclusion classes, I shook my head and told Catherine I didn't want to. I wanted to stay and study instead. Evidently, I wasn't missed. Nobody sent a frantic message to room H5 wondering why Melody wasn't in class today. Nobody peeked their head in the door to see if I was absent or sick or maybe having a convulsion in the middle of the floor. Nobody seemed to notice at all. Chapter 19. The week zipped by. I studied at school every day with Catherine, after school every day with Mrs. V, and every evening at home as well. I reviewed words from all the levels of my board. I practiced spelling long words and matching facts and dates. I made up my own games. Mom quizzed me about flowers and medical terms. Dad asked me questions about economics and retail management and sports. I swallowed it all. Sometimes I sit in my room and just type in new sentences for Elvira to say, one letter at a time. It takes hours. But once an entry is in, all I have to do is push one button and the whole sentence will be spoken for me. I guess the question I get asked the most in a lot of strange variation is, what's wrong with you? People often want to know if I'm sick or if I'm in pain or if my condition can be fixed. So I prepared two answers, one that is polite but kind of wordy and one that is a little smart-mouthed. To those who are genuinely concerned, I push a button to say, I have spastic bila, bilateral quadriplegia. Quadriplegia. I'm not saying that right. Quadriplegia. I don't know. Also known as cerebral palsy. It limits my body, but not my mind. I think the last part's pretty cool. To people like Claire and Molly, I say, we all have disabilities. What's yours? I couldn't wait to use that one. When I showed Mrs. V, she laughed so hard she snorted. Now it's the Saturday before the tryouts, and Mrs. B and I are sitting outside on our front porch. I'm wearing a light jacket, but it's one of those rare, warm February days that fools the hyacinths into thinking spring is here. I want to warn the little buds and say, wait, it's going to snow next week. Stay put for another month. But every year, the early spring flowers shiver in the last snow of the season. We watch wisps of clouds hover over us. A canary-colored goldfish is perched on the railing, looking at the empty bird feeder dangling above it. If he could talk, I bet he'd ask for a thistle and more warm days like this. What would you do if you could fly? Mrs. V asked as she glanced from the birds to me. Is that on the quiz? I asked, grinning as I typed. I think we've studied just about everything else, Mrs. B chuckles. I'd be scared to let go, I typed. Afraid you'd fall? She asked. No, afraid it would feel so good I'd just fly away. It took me a long time to type that. She is quiet for a very long time. Finally, she says, you are a bird, Melody, and you will fly on Monday when you take the test. I hear our front door slam shut next door, and I wave to Mom and Penny as they wander over the porch. Butterscotch, clearly happy to be unleashed, bounds next to them, sniffling the base of every tree. Penny walks with such determination, her face altering between frowns and smiles as she concentrates on marching down the path between our two houses, then climbing the front steps with both hands and both feet. She's wearing her puffy winter jacket and the hat of the day, a blue straw thing that is scrunched and crooked from her sitting on it so many times. Poor Doodle, of course, drags behind her. Dee Dee! She cries as she finally gets to the top step. I'm still boggled by how easily she does stuff. I touch the sleeve of Mrs. V's dress as I think about what she asked me. Freedom, I type, pointing at Penny. Freedom. Mrs. Valencia nods. She understands. What a glorious day, Mom says, breathing deeply. You think we're done with winter? More cold coming, I type. You're right, but it sure is a nice preview, Mom says as she unzips Penny's jacket. How's the study team progressing? Butterscotch rests at the bottom of the steps. I swear that dog looks like she's smiling. Good, I say through my Medi-talker. Violet, you're amazing, Mom says. The time and effort you put into teaching her and getting her ready for this test, and she breaks off, blinking hard. You must have taught her thousands of words. Nobody seems to be amazed that Penny is soaking up and learning thousands of words. Mrs. V replies with a shrug. Melody's no different. Mom nods in agreement. I know, you're right. But it's just so much harder for Melody. No, it's harder for us. We have to figure out what's in her head. I'm getting tired of them talking about me like I'm in another room. I turn the volume on my machine up loud. Let's have cookies. Cookies, Penny repeats. Mrs. V stands up. I hear you, Penny, baby. Let me find us some sweets. As she heads into the house, she turns to Mom and says softly, Ms. Melody here has always had a special place in my heart. Heartburn, I type. That gets them both laughing. Mrs. V returns a few minutes later with a plate of hot chocolate chip cookies and 2 servings of milk in red sippy cups decorated with Disney princesses. I hate to admit it, but a sippy cup makes it easier for me to drink. Cookies! Penny screams. She reaches for the plate, but Mom pulls her arm back. Mrs. V gives Mom 2 cookies on a paper towel. Mom blows on one, then gives it to Penny, who proceeds to stuff the whole thing in her mouth. Look at my little Penny pig, Mom says, laughing. Mrs. V breaks my cookie into segments, then places a piece in my mouth. Although I'm a caramel lover, these cookies must have been made in chocolate heaven. I swallowed while Mrs. V gives me sips of cool milk. Cookies smooshed down so great with milk, I don't even have to try to chew. I'd love to have enough control to feed myself, but that's on my list of things I'd wish for, along with walking and taking myself to the bathroom. And, oh yeah, flying. Interrupting my thoughts, Mrs. V asked, What what contented what what continent produces the largest crop of cocoa beans, which gives us this chocolate? Africa, I type. She nods and gives me another sip of milk. And which state produces the most milk? California, I reply. I think you're ready, Melody, Mrs. V announces. Mom reaches over and strokes my cheek. You're going to rock on Monday. Then what? I type. Then you'll run for president, Mrs. V interjects. Yeah, right, I tap out. Just then, Dad pulls into our driveway. Boy, does our big old car need a trip to the car wash. I guess Chuck got off early today, Mom says, looking pleased. Maybe we can get an early dinner. Dad gets out of the car, stretches and waves at us. Penny's face lights up. Daddy! She calls out, standing up. She looks at us with a devilish grin. Don't you dare, Mrs. V warns her in her I mean it voice. Penny ignores her. Go bye-bye in car. She loves to ride in the car. It doesn't matter where, the store, the post office, as long as she gets to ride in her little car seat in the back. Doesn't make much sense to me. She falls asleep as soon as we turn the first corner. She hurriedly bumps down a couple of the porch steps, then 2 more, waiting for a reaction from Mom. Penny Marie Brooks, you bring your little buns right back up here, my mom cries out. When Mom uses all 3 names, it's serious. Penny reaches the bottom of the steps, looks back at us, smirks, and says, See, Daddy, gotta go to work. Then, as fast as her short legs will carry her, she bolts for Dad. Mom, of course, has other ideas. So does Butterscotch, who jumps up, gives 3 short barks, almost like Mom using 3 names, and calmly walks in front of Penny to block her path. Good dog, Mom says. Come back here, little cookie face. By this time, she has hurried down the porch steps and retrieved my sister. This child, she says to my dad, who is ambling over to us, is an escape artist. I need 4 sets of eyes with her. She wipes the chocolate off Penny's face and nuzzles her. Good thing you got Butterscotch, Dad says, as he brushes the top of the dog's head. How's my shiny copper penny today? Dad kisses Mom on the cheek and takes Penny with her. Penny manages to rub the rest of the chocolate from her hands onto the front of Dad's shirt. Just what I always wanted, Dad says as he glances down. Chocolate-covered clothes. The napkin Mrs. V passes him only smears it more. Dad just laughs. Go work, Daddy? Daddy just got home. Give me a break, kiddo. He hands Penny gently to Mrs. V, then sits with Mom on the porch swing. And how's my favorite melody? He asks me. Super, I type on my machine. Ready for your competition? Yep, I tap. Dad gets up and squats in front of me. You're going to ace that test and make that quiz team. I can tell he means it. I believe in me and my family does, and Mrs. V. It's the rest of the world I'm not so sure of. And that is the end of chapter 19.